would like to welcome you to this webinar. Just put this in speaker view. So this webinar is being recorded. So if you'd rather not have your video showing, then feel free to switch that up and remove the video feature. Also, we will ask you also to please mute your microphone until there's an opportunity for discussion. We might ask you to unmute your microphone. So my name is Leanne Matthews, and I am your host, the host of these webinars that we've been doing. This, of course, is the third and final webinar in the series, and it's my favorite topic. Today's topic is on digital formation and community building. And I'm very, very excited to welcome the guests, which I will introduce to you in just a quick moment. A few words of orientation. As you already know, this is a webinar format, so we're going to keep our microphones and videos off until otherwise asked. And I also wanted to thank you because a number of you have been here every single week. So that's been really wonderful. So nice to have you. I feel like we've already formed some sense of community just showing up on these Friday mornings. So great to see familiar faces, and welcome to those who are perhaps here for the first time. These webinars will of course be available on our website to peruse and view and share, perhaps with other members of your team whenever you might need to. Big, huge thanks to Jonathan White, who has been at my side helping out with all of these webinars, and especially thank you as well to the speakers that we've recruited for this morning's topic. And if it's okay with you, I would ask us to just take a moment to pray. So let us pray. Living God, be with us in our inquiry today. Be with us in our frustration, in our fear and uncertainty. We are called to reveal you and illumine the darkness. May this conversation be a light on our path to serve you and reveal your mercy, hope, justice, and grace. Amen. Okay, I just want to make sure that, all right. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the panel quickly and actually ask the panel if you'd be so kind as to say a few words about yourselves and why it is, what it is that brings you here, and what exactly makes your experience relevant to this conversation on digital faith formation and community building. We have the Reverend Rob Cooke, we have the Reverend Dr. Joanne Mercer, and we have Dr. Jonathan White, all three of which will be our presenters, and I have a whole slew of questions for them. I don't know if we're going to get through them all. I also really invite you to, those of you who are with us this morning, to also use the chat function to ask any questions, to interact, to engage in the conversation, so that it's not just me asking questions, but all of us are free to weigh in as we dive into this topic. So let's start with you, Reverend Rob. Tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm the rector at St. Mark's Church in St. John's, also adjunct faculty member at Queen's College Faculty of Theology, also here in St. John's. I want to dispel any misunderstandings that I'm some kind of expert in this, because I'm not, but I'm someone who has tried and failed and had some successes along the way, I guess, in experimenting with social media, especially in terms of building community within an already existing faith community. So yeah, I'm just someone who's tried some stuff, and some stuff has worked and some stuff hasn't. And Leanne and I are friends. And when she invited me to come and talk about this kind of stuff, I said, yeah, sure. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. How about you, Joanne? Let us know a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm here, I think, because Rob invited me to come. I live not in St. John's. I live on an island, off an island, off an island, off an island. So I live in Twillingate, the iceberg capital of the world. So I live in a rural place. I've been ordained for 30 years. My academic background has been in theology and ethics of media, and in theology and media, and that's some of what I've taught. I've worked in parishes, and I've worked in community groups, and I've worked in academic settings, and like I said, I'm full-time in a parish now. And so this idea of how we communicate our faith has been a passion of mine for years. So whether it's digitally or in more traditional forms, and how we form communities, and with a very broad kind of stroke. So yeah, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'm Rob's friend and Rob's your friend, so we're all friends.
I love it. Thank you so much, Joanne. And Jonathan, don't say nothing, because we know that you've got,
I don't think I need to introduce myself though, but I suppose one of the things that interests me about this particular topic is that everything we do in church, whatever types of activities, have a community aspect to them. But also, I suppose, thinking about what do you do when groups can't actually function anymore? So obviously I'm coming at it from a musical point of view. Choirs, we know, won't be able to meet in any normal sense for quite some time. But the community building in those groups and in other groups within your churches is still obviously an important part of your life and of your communities. And so just thinking about those sorts of things, and hopefully also finding some positivity again in all this, and not feeling too despondent about the lack of embodied community, but still a very, very present spiritual community.
Thank you. So as you can see, those of us who are here this morning, we are very blessed by this conversation, and I'm really, really enthusiastic about diving into questions with you all. So thank you so much to our really, really fabulous panel this morning. So I'm going to be just throwing a few questions out. Again, you are invited to do the same thing using the chat function. Let's just talk about the importance of faith formation. So let's talk about faith formation. Like, what is it? Why should it matter? And when does formation happen? Like, in your experience, is it happening during worship or Bible study? So just like to give us some context here for what is faith formation, and why does it even matter to us as leaders in the church?
We're like, who wants to start? Well, I would say we have to be really, for me, I have to be very careful not to be narrow in my understanding of faith formation and community development in terms of our church, because we tend to sort of sometimes as churches, I think of faith formation as what happens when we do church, right? When we do official kinds of things. But theology, faith formation, religion, whatever terms you want to use, is far more broad than that. And I think it's a part of every time we tell stories, and every time we engage one another, and every time we sort of question one another. So I don't think that it is limited. I think part of what leaders do within a faith community is help bring some questions, some spiritual reflection to all the events in our lives that have sort of formed our faith. So to me, it's about interaction and relationship in storytelling. These two things, these things are very central, to faith formation. So like what we're doing now is faith formation. We're gathering, we're asking questions, we're pushing each other, we're getting to know each other, we'll share some stories with each other. Sort of when, I forget which theologians have said that, like when the story I tell of myself and the story that God tells of us sort of interact, that's part of when faith formation happens to me. Bobby?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, that part of what, faith leaders do, whether ordained or lay leaders, is really help people make connections, like that Joanne is talking about. So that, that film you just watched, that book you just read, that hike you just went on, it's about bringing all those things together and trying to, figure out how that helps us become better and more intentional followers of Jesus. And really that faith formation is an outgrowth, and I would say probably a responsibility of our baptismal covenant. Right, this is something that we're always engaged in, and it's not just churchy stuff. It's all aspects of our lives is where we're called to develop that faith formation.
Jonathan, do you want to add anything?
Well, I mean, I suppose I think of it very much as an opportunity to position this church in society again, that we know lots of people are turning to the church at the moment. They're not necessarily seeking out answers, but they're curious to know. And this is an opportunity for us as a community, us as a global community, to kind of say we do have a way of addressing this, not necessarily answering this, but of providing people with that community. And I mean, it's funny that we live in a world where we can so easily contact one another, and yet loneliness and isolation have been problems for years now. And of course, this situation is actually making some of that worse for a lot of people. But we do have an opportunity to be there. And faith formation, as has already been said, takes many shapes. And one of its most important features for me is the church being a presence for people that needs it, whether they are looking to develop a faith or whether they just actually need someone to help them, because that is our calling to be there to support people. And that in showing and sharing that love, we will bring more people into it as well and help spread it. And so I think it is a positive thing.
I want to just pick up something that Jonathan just said. It's in the showing of, it's in the acting, it's in your praxis, is in how you live out your faith. I think that you do the most formation. And I think that's sort of it, like being that space where people, not that you have to provide the answers, but I think a lot of folk I hear from are really happy to have a place to see the church asking the same questions that they're asking, and openly struggling with trying to make meaning in this very strange time, and that honesty and vulnerability, that they're not alone in that. I think that's fundamental these days.
Well, also there's the importance of the connection between community and faith formation. They really should go hand in hand. And I have a parishioner here who I quote him all the time when it comes to stuff like this. And he once said, he doesn't trust himself to do that work of faith formation on his own, that he needs the community in order to keep him honest, because it's way too easy to just, create God in your own image, to create Jesus in your own image, to, come up with this understanding of what it means to be a disciple or a follower on your own terms, rather than have to do the uncomfortable work of figuring that stuff out with other people, real people who you disagree with, maybe get on your nerves, right? That community is so important to faith formation, which is why it's so challenging right now. How do you build community and do that faith formation when all the ways we used to do that before, meeting together for Bible studies, prayer groups, even just worship on Sunday, has been so radically changed. So now how do we continue to maintain that community and do that faith formation?
Thanks. Andy has a comment. He says, like St. Francis of Assisi.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, great. Yeah, don't be shy to, if you have something to add on, I'll definitely try and read out your comments to anybody who's viewing, or just a question, or even if you agree with something. Carla says, the fact that we can connect outside our bubble can be beneficial for community building.
I think especially during this time, being able to connect and being able to have a place to have a voice. I was at Walmart yesterday, because I was in Grand Falls, in a big center that had a Walmart, and I came across someone who had participated in one of our online studies this spring. And he said to me, I didn't get a chance to tell you this before, but it was so good to have a place where I could have a voice, where I could talk about these things that were concerning me, and I think that's sort of it, right? Like having that place, if you're sort of feeling isolated and you're having these questions and you think you're the only one, having a place where your voice can be heard and honored and listened to and responded to and held up in community. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty, like, we are so gifted that to be going through this crisis with these tools available to us to use.
I would even go so far as to say that technology maybe does a better job of creating that space for questioning and conversation than normal in-person church does, because our liturgy is so structured and there is not much opportunity for, you know, an engagement where you can talk about stuff and maybe build community that way. I've often said that maybe one of the holiest things we do on Sunday is have a cup of tea or coffee after church, so we can start to unpack some of the things that we just did in church. It's like this transitional space from worship out into the real world. So technology, I think, through social media, whether it's Zoom or Facebook or whatever you're using, in some ways can be an even safer space than being in person, if we're intentional about it and, you know, in creating those spaces. Yeah, it's easier in some ways to be more honest and open in a venue like this than it is in a more public space like church.
Okay, thanks. I think we'll move on to the next question unless anybody else has any other comments on the first question or any other questions related to that question. So the next thing I want to ask you all is, let's talk about the impact of faith formation. So what is the impact of faith formation on spiritual life? I want to know how you've seen this personally in your experience in church leadership, and in particular as it pertains to digital ministry. But not all at once. You're going to have to take your time, because you're going to have to do one at a time. Okay, not because you're all talking, you know, just.
That's a hard kind of question, hence the silence, I guess. Because they're so interwoven, it's kind of hard to pick apart sometimes the threads. But I mean, I think that story, like I said, I just told you of that gentleman I ran into Walmart. You know, obviously that formal faith formation, that Bible study we were doing, you know, had a impact. I mean, you do tend to hear that, you know, about having that spot. But I think it's see, I think any time an engagement with another person, you listen to another person's story, and you begin to question your whole framework for your story and your understanding of your faith story, has that spiritual impact, right? Because it makes you question who I am, who did I think God was, how is God acting? I never thought of that as God acting in my life, but you know, so-and-so just said that's how they understand it. Maybe I can understand it that way too. So I think it's not very neat and tidy, but to me, the impact faith formation has is in the new questions it brings to my mind, the new things I start to pick apart. But that might be my way of spiritual growth.
I think too, the importance of conversation, right? That I think one of the big impacts of faith formation that I've experienced, especially in regards to, you know, digital media, is the conversations that it opens up for people, which is in some sense hard to measure. So I agree with Joanne. In Newfoundland, we would say it's a bit tangly. Or entangled or interwoven. But I know the feedback that I've gotten from people is just the conversations that some of this stuff opens up, right? That we've tend to associate any kind of faith formation with going to church. And for increasing numbers of people, that's just not where they get, you know, any kind of spiritual nourishment. So when they hear about a church that's doing something on Facebook Live or, YouTube Live or Zoom, they're intrigued because, again, going back to that safe space, they feel like, okay, I could go there and be part of that and take part in that. But to go to a church on Sunday, to have to dress up and go to church and behave when I don't know all the rules and regulations of what you do in church, I can sit in front of my computer and engage in these kinds of conversations that I think are really important to people. People really want to have these conversations. You know, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? How can I make the world a better place? Like, what's this all about? I think people want to talk about those things, but I think maybe going to church is not where they feel safe having those conversations.
I also think, now that I've thought a bit, thank you for talking, Rob.
You're welcome.
That sometimes, like some of the things we do online, like we sort of think about traditional faith formation and spiritual formation. A lot of it is developing a rule of life or a pattern of life, right? So there's several of us I know I do, I know our bishop does, and there's several other groups that I follow that post daily prayers, right? Carmelia, a community, faith and worship. And I think, I get stopped a lot in the grocery store or out and about in the community about people talking to me about, thank you for that prayer today. So I think like helping people see that we begin our day by stopping and praying and bringing our, concerns to God. And I, so I do that every day. And most times it's just, a few, whatever people follow. But now if there's a crisis, if I pray about something that's going on in people's lives, well, that like 120 can come thousands, right? Because somehow you've helped them take their fear and speak it into a prayer. And so I think teaching people or modeling for people, orthopraxis, like modeling for people to do things, modeling for people, so people will say, oh, I heard what you were saying and I went and volunteered here, or I went and I dropped something off there, or I called so-and-so. To me, that's sort of the evidence of the faith formation having impact and impacting people's spiritual lives.
Yeah, so this is the way that Joanne and my relationship works is I talk and then she gets ideas, then she talks and I get ideas. So as she was talking, then I thought about my own very personal experience of a few years ago, my dad died by suicide. And so I was very intentional about talking about that quite openly through social media, and the number of conversations that opened up because I opened up was just so powerful. And people reaching out to me to say, I had a similar experience or I struggled with this. It was just beautiful to see people open up, like that. So that idea of when we share our stories and our stories kind of mix up with each other, really good things can happen. And the number of people who have said to me, because you talked about it, now I can talk about it. Or because you talked about this, now I'm going to go and help someone else. So it's just, the power of that kind of faith formation and community is really powerful.
Thank you for that. I would like to just reassure Ingrid that we will have a chance for conversation with your microphone unmuted shortly. For now, while the presenters are presenting, if you could just use the chat function. I do have a comment from Gwenda who said, here's a big problem with church coffee hour online. If you don't have breakout groups for some reason, my church gave up on that early on. I don't know why. The conversation can get pretty trivial. And conversational openings that might have led to a real exchange get sidelined. Very hard when you have preached, I can tell you, when we're back to cheerful parish, catching up and banter. Yeah.
Yeah, I know here at St. Mark's, our choir that has about 30 or 35 members has tried some Zoom gatherings just to stay in touch with each other. And so I've joined in with some of them, and it's pretty chaotic. But then again, community is chaotic. So I think that's a good thing, but I can definitely relate to that, concern there that those kind of Zoom coffee hours can get a bit trivial. But life is trivial sometimes, and it's good to be able to talk those things out.
Here's a question from Grace. If we're doing okay with a Zoom worship Bible study for grown-ups and Zoom messy church for the littles, but I have people asking about something for older kids and I'm stumped, especially since our 9 to 14-year-olds were only just beginning to do some activities together before lockdown. There isn't really an established group dynamic to build on.
That's a tough one. We tried Zoom for our Sunday school kids, so like younger, I guess, primary age kids, and it didn't work very well. The feedback we got is the kids were doing so much of that for school anyways, because everything had shifted to online, that they get them to sit still for one more thing. And I would say it would be the same thing for 9 to 14-year-olds. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't have any youth groups in my parish, but my United Church friend next door does, and she done a lot of sort of project things with it. And I think that age group might work, where she's got them to work on something, video tape it or whatever, and they put it online or they incorporate it into their services, so that they are building some relationships through chatting online to do that. But yeah, like, because building relationship, whether digitally or in person, takes time and effort and work. And so when you don't already have that, you can't sort of translate that to another platform. You're going to have to build it. So it's going to depend on what kinds of, who those kids are, what kinds of things they like to do, what kind of platforms. Like, can you give them a TikTok challenge? Like, I don't know you need to know what platforms they use and what platforms their parents are comfortable for them to use. And yeah, it's going to take a lot of work. Sorry.
So I do have good news, because now a number of comments and questions are coming in around children and youth ministry. So actually on October, the last Monday of October, I have the animator for the National Church coming on a Monday evening, and we're actually going to be really diving into the particulars on digital ministry to kids. So if we could just maybe just shelf that question just for now, we'll be able to look more deeply at that in about 3 weeks time. I'll just give you a date on that. October the 26th. Jim says, Gwenda, one thing I try to do in online coffee hour is know to mention something that might indicate a pastoral need or question on the sermon, and give them a call during the week. Yeah, I mean, I think another thing, I'll just throw my own comment in there too, is that somebody needs to host. If you have a host of any conversation, you need that host help to shape the culture and the nature of the discourse. So if you want people to talk about the sermon, then the host needs to ask questions about the sermon and steer people back on track.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done, we haven't done a Zoom coffee hour, but I do a weekly community check-in through Facebook Live. And so I might have a couple of points I want to talk about, but then I just throw it open to people can ask questions, or, I'll say, tell us what you're watching on Netflix or where you're going this summer, and create, conversation that way. And that was very well received in the parish, and people felt like it was a way of keeping connected with each other, even though, it wasn't like this where you can see everybody's face, but you could see and interact with each other in the comments section. So that's worked well for us.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. And I know that both of you have done a lot, well, all of you, Jonathan as well, has done a lot in terms of digital relationship building during this pandemic. Let's talk about how your personal approach to digital formation, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of the various digital platforms in your estimation. So I know that you both have used different platforms for different reasons. Let's unpack that a little bit. What has worked, what hasn't worked, why? Let's hear it.
So I can start, I guess. The primary platform that we use here at St. Mark's is Facebook, and we had the benefit of being very intentional about this kind of stuff before COVID even hit. So we've spent years building up a Facebook community, to the point that even before COVID started, I was telling people that I served in a parish that had 4 different congregations, because we have worship on Saturdays at 5, which is a more contemporary kind of service. Then we have an 8:30 a.m. service on Sunday, which is very traditional. And then 10:30 a.m., which is kind of like what I call the big production, with the choir, Sunday school, and all that stuff. But I said, the 4th congregation for us is our Facebook page. We have over 1,000 people who, are connected with our page. That didn't happen overnight, and it took a long time. It took a lot of, like I said in my introduction, doing things that worked, doing things that didn't work. But, being very intentional about communicating that way, not only just with, announcements of what's going on in the parish or asking people to donate to the church, but just like sharing interesting articles that people might find, good for faith formation. At St. Mark's, we don't take ourselves very seriously, so we're good with laughing at ourselves, but also making other people laugh. So like sharing funny things. We have a sign in the front of our church that we'd like to put funny sayings on, and share those kinds of things. And so all of that goes into the building of a community. So when COVID hit, we already had a ready-made community. We had talked with a communications expert a few years ago who was very helpful in helping us develop a communication strategy. And I would recommend that to any parish. If you know someone in your congregation, or if someone in your congregation knows someone who is a communications person, even if you have to spend a bit of money, that's not a bad idea. And actually, I think that's one area where like diocesan leadership could be really helpful to provide that kind of training for parishes. So like it took a lot of work for us to build up a Facebook community. Zoom, it was really new to us once COVID hit. But we did do, like all of our meetings, parish meetings have been on through Zoom, but I also did a book study in the spring on Rachel Held Evans' book, Inspired. And that was absolutely fantastic. I got twice as many people through Zoom as I would get if I just did it here in the parish hall. And I had people from outside the diocese, outside the Anglican tradition, so many people that I had to split the group into 2 sections. But it was really interesting to see the community forming over the 4 or 5 weeks that we spent together. And then I heard that people were staying in contact with each other outside of the book study, which was really encouraging. So those would be the 2 things that we've done. I try to keep a Twitter presence. I'm terrible at it. I try to keep an Instagram presence. I'm not so good at that either. But the 2 main things that we've done is Facebook and Zoom. It takes a lot of work though.
So a similar story to Robert. We've been using Facebook for a long time. I mean, I think, so we have a way bigger Facebook community than we have. Like my 3 congregations together is probably 120 families, 130 families. We got like 600 followers on Facebook. So we have a way more on Facebook than in real life, whatever that is. But I would say what you want to sort of think about is like, what's the story you want to tell? Like, what is it you're trying to communicate? Like, what is the essence of what if you're going to use some of these platforms, then you got to sort of figure out who your folk are, right? So for me, I do use a lot of Facebook, because that's sort of the age group of my parishioners, and they are on Facebook. So you got to sort of think about that, and then you need to be realistic. So, like, is it realistic for you to have be posting on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and if you're a parish priest, you're not a social media guru, or maybe you are, I don't know. But you know, so you got to think about what's realistic, right? What can you really, and be consistent. So like I said, one of the consistent things I do is the daily prayer. And on Sundays, I use the collect because I'm too tired. I know that I'm going to be tired, so I have that already ready. So like it's something realistic. So other things I might do, but I know that I'm going to do that. So have a plan what you can do. There are lots of platforms to help you sort of cross posts and things like that if you want to do that. In terms of like formal formation, my sort of approach during the pandemic was, okay, let's do something we wouldn't have been able to do without these tools. Like we wouldn't have even thought of doing without the pandemic. So I worked with one of my good friends in Nova Scotia, who's now the Bishop-elect of Nova Scotia PI. And so we did a Bible study. And so we worked together and did like a YouTube video of like the introductory section to your Bible study. So if you would normally come in and tell people the background information about that piece of scripture, that's what we did. And then she had Zoom group, and I had a Zoom group and a Facebook group because some of my folk were afraid of Zoom. So you gotta work with what you got. So and that was great because again, like Robert, I had people right from St. John's to Vancouver, and people were who had clergy. I had lay people who've never done Bible study before, people who've done oodles of Bible studies before, but they really wanted to have a place to meet together. So I think that's important, and I think you'll see that people come onto your platforms or follow you or watch your worship or whatever you're presenting, often based on relationships. So these people either knew me, had lived in Twillingate at one point, knew somebody else in the Bible study, somebody else had shared it. Like they had a connection, right? They didn't just go, oh, look, that's interesting, I'm going to go click on that, right? So building relationships is key online and offline.
You'd also said, Joanne, to me that you were not using Zoom because of unstable internet connection.
Yeah, so for our Sunday worship, we record it and post it long after because it takes hours to actually put a 40-minute video from the computer to the web. One of my friends in the neighboring island attempted to do live, and I think it took 4 sessions to finish one service because it would get boosted off. Yeah. So, I mean, you got to think about what internet you have, and who are your people? Like, so for a lot of I have a lot of older folk, a lot of people don't even have internet. So we record it, then I actually put it on, I had an old iPad, and we passed that around to people so that people who weren't online could still be a part of this formation, could still hear the sermons, could still hear the Bible study classes, could still participate, probably not in as active way, but they knew what was happening. So you're not really like limited, because that's the thing you have to think about, the digital divide. If you're, who are your folk? What do they do? What do they have access to? Right. So, if you're putting things on a platform that, and you're hoping to reach your members of your congregation, and none of them use that platform, not going to work. If you're wanting to bring new people in, and you're using like young people, and you're using Facebook, they're not likely going to work either. Right. So you need to think who you want to communicate to, what you want to communicate, and then what skills do you have, or what skills the people in your parish have, and that you can draw upon to make that happen. And then what's realistic in terms of your time commitment. Because like I've changed some of what I was doing in terms of filming and editing because it was taking too much time.
Yeah, I think just to add to what Joanne was saying, because I agree with what she's saying, but I think the 3 important questions, like to summarize what Joanna said, the 3 important questions are who, right? So who are you trying to reach? And then if it's in a conversation around digital media, why is digital media necessary? Like, why do you want to use digital media to connect with these people? Because the answer might be that it's not really the way to go, or you're going to have to get creative about it. And then only finally do you get to how. So how are we going to do this? Would it be Facebook? And I got to say about Facebook, the fastest growing cohort on Facebook is the 65 plus demographic. So there's a ton of people on Facebook, probably. But I find with that age group, they sometimes they won't even tell you they're on Facebook because but it's almost like they won't be cool if they are on Facebook, because they like to bash Facebook sometimes, but they're on there, right? They're looking at the cute cat memes. They're looking at the pictures of their kids and grandkids and that kind of stuff. So they're on there. It's just finding a way to connect with them. But that last question of how is super important. And, so I saw someone comment there just now that their parishioners are the phone generation. I think that was Carla said that.
That's okay too.
And that's fine, but Zoom can work that way, right? So set up small group Zoom meetings where people aren't necessarily, connecting through computer, but are phoning in to, and maybe you can do a Bible study that way, or have a little discussion group, or just check in with, get a group of people together that are friends within the parish, get them together that way to just have a chat, right? Like a smaller kind of coffee hour conversation. And the other thing that Joanne said is really important that I think I kind of got to reinforce too, is the idea of sustainability. What's sustainable over the long haul? And this is not just about COVID-19 and the pandemic, but this is the new reality now, right? Like there's no, okay, once we get a vaccine and life goes back to normal, we can forget all this social media stuff, this digital stuff. No. This is the new reality now. We're going to have a foot in both worlds, the in-person stuff, but also the digital stuff. So what's sustainable over the long haul? And I learned some hard lessons since March and came pretty darn close to, exhaustion through all of this, because you're constantly, okay, what can I do now? What can I do next? What's the next thing I can do? How can I be better? And then you watch what other people are doing, and then you feel like crap because, I'm not doing that. I could be doing that. Why, so what's sustainable for you and for the parish over the long haul, which makes it really important to realize, and this is really hard for us clergy, we don't have to do it all ourselves. You can find other people to help, right? That can take on some of the responsibility with some of this digital ministry.
And we all don't have the same resources, and that's okay. Because I like to tease Robert, because Robert has fancy dancy cameras. I don't know if you still have them there? Because the week before, there was professional people with cameras in his church, and they left them there for them to use. I had this. But we had somebody in our parish who did drone video. He didn't have that. So
well, actually, I do. Yes, I do.
No.
Same guy.
But I mean, you use what you have, and it's all you got to think. All these things are media, right? So phoning, creating a phone circle so people check in on each other. That's using a media, right? That's still a medium. It may not be. It's probably using digital technology too. One of my parishioners said, one of my fellow clergy said, hardly any of her parishioners that she wanted to reach, the people she was concerned about, use online. So she did a newsletter and had people fan out and drop them off. Do what works, and stop watching other people and making yourself feel bad, because we all do different stuff. And if you really like what someone else do, just share it and say, here, watch that. I can't do that.
Yeah. Can I tell a story? I've told Leanne this story before, but it's the story of how we ended up with this professional camera person here who's still doing a tremendous amount of work for us. So I have to go back a few years. So we started, I mentioned earlier, a Saturday evening service that's more contemporary. We have a band that plays, you know, good contemporary worship music, not yucky stuff. And so we got to a point where we realized we needed to hire someone to lead that band. So we went outside of the church and hired someone, a local jazz musician actually, to be to lead the band. And so then he brought in some of his musician friends. And so one of those people has a connection with like booking space for musicians and stuff in the city. And it's apparently getting increasingly hard for musicians to find space to do stuff. And so at the same time, we were having a conversation here, but how do we better utilize our space? You know, we rent out the parish hall, but then the church proper is just kind of sitting there. And so we said, well, how about if we just open up to the music community, the arts community, and see if anybody wants to use our space. And so we decided to do that. We ended up booking a singing competition here called Sing NL. And actually the host of it was the host of Canadian Idol, Zach Werner. And so he brought in someone to live stream that for him. I struck up a relationship with the camera person. When COVID struck and everything shut down, that person came to me and said, would you like to have help live streaming your services? And your service at first, he said. So he came and did the first Sunday after COVID shut down. And I thought, okay, he's going to do one, but he's been here every Sunday helping us live stream services. So when you open up yourself, your parish, your space, and try different things, good things can happen. And so now, I mean, we've purchased some of our own equipment, but he's helped us purchase that, set it all up. It's just fantastic. So I don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Relationship.
Great.
All about relationship.
Yeah, relationships.
I love it. A lot of people are writing in, they want to share their own, like you can read the comments of what people are doing, and thank you for continue to make those comments in the chat. I want to check in on you, Jonathan. Do you have anything to add to the question of the strengths and the weaknesses of the various platforms?
I mean, a lot's been said already. I think that I would echo that it's, bear in mind that they do all have different opportunities. So something like Instagram is great for instant reactions, but you're not going to do anything meaningful with a platform that is entirely image based. And obviously Facebook is good for, but a lot of it probably depends on what you're trying to do. And of course, it's important to separate what you might do in a service context as opposed to what you might do in a formation group. But I mean, it's been touched on already about this notion of presence in the community as well. And that so much of this also helps to give you a presence. And so whether you are putting, I mean, as I say, it's already been spoken about how many places are doing daily prayers, for example. And I would say that just because somebody else is doing it, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it either. I mean, clergy say prayers every day anyway. You'll all be saying the daily office, for example. It's a great way of just giving yourself an easy presence, for example, and don't be intimidated by people that do make it look more professional, because so much can be done with just a smartphone and a little bit of forward thinking about how you physically look in a setting. So, I mean, don't appear in the kitchen with your underwear drying in the background, for example. And it seems like a very obvious thing to say, but it's these very small details that anybody can do that actually do make things look more professional. And it's also particularly, I mean, I think Rob spoke about it earlier, about what story do you want to say about yourself, that actually engaging your community in this too. So whether you share an Instagram account or a Facebook or however you're going to do it, that just imparting some degree of branding, for want of a better word, is a really good way as well, because you kind of want to make sure in this world of social media where everything is instantly consumed in a millisecond of scrolling through, that people still kind of know it's you, because that helps, as I say, to build up your own identity. And this is all part of a much bigger communication strategy. And sure, if you've got the resources to call someone in, then that's great. but so much I think you can do yourself. We spoke, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, about this is a great opportunity to think about a mission statement if you don't have one already. Or if you do have one, maybe thinking about what your digital ministry mission statement might be, because again, once you have that reference point, it's so much easier to figure out how these different tools are going to work for you. And that is also going to include your community and what tools they're using. I mean, some people have already mentioned in the chat about how they're actually providing support to people. And I do think that is a part of ministry now, that helping people overcome this inherent fear of technology that we kind of just need to get over. And obviously there are socioeconomic aspects connected with all this too, that we might be in places where parishioners can't afford this, or they don't have ready access to internet. So there are other things too, but that once upon a time electricity wasn't a given, and now we just take it for granted. And this is kind of one of those things now, I think, too. So if you have a community that's able to provide that support as well and help people into this, I think it will make a big difference too.
Thank you. Great. So I'm just going to check. I think we're okay. I encourage you all to read the comments. I believe they're all to everyone, so I don't think I need to read those. They're not explicitly to me. I'd like to know if you could now give us some practical tools. I'm asking, maybe we can create some kind of checklist about like what is effective digital formation to help leaders who might just be getting started or who wish to improve what they're already doing. So like, what would you say would be like the things people would need to do to improve their digital formation, their ministry on here? In 3 easy steps, because that's all it takes.
Well, I would say, I think in some ways we've covered it. Like know what message you want to send, what it is, or why you're doing this, and then to figure out what medium, like, so who you're trying to communicate with. And then you need to figure out, you might need to do a little research, or like Robert said, if you can get a communication person in to sort of say, well, what platform is best for that. And like there's lots of free workshops. I just attended a great one here, the digital festival in Twillingate, and all kinds of professionals were there to help folk. So if you look at in your community development, like look outside the church, look to community development groups, because we're not the only ones trying to do this. And so a lot of these groups are offering free workshops on how to do these things. And so, and then sort of, figure out what's realistic. And I would suggest, like one of the workshops I went to last week, and I did send that to you, I think, Leanne, so maybe you can send that out to people, that you just, let me just call it up. Nope, wrong thing. You figure that out. Like, so what's your goal, right? So are you trying to contact your parishioners? Are you trying to reach out to the public? You want more people to attend your online worship? You want people to go to your webpage? You want people to give you money? Like, what is it what's your primary reason, right? So, and then who? So who do you so someone talked about they want to get a youth group. Are you wanting to connect with people who normally come to church? You wanting this to be a mission thing? Like, we're all doing this for different reasons, so what we're going to do is not going to be the same. And then what's your main message, right? Figure out what your story is. And it's important, I think, like Jonathan said, it's important that who you are, what you do, and what your message is the same, right? So that, like, so if your message is about being the body of Christ, then you have to be the body of Christ. Like, you don't just talk about, having faith in Jesus. You have to live that out in a way people can see. And then I'd say the easiest thing is just make yourself a little menu. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, what can I do? And even make a plan. So if you've not done this, make a plan. Like, so on Monday, I'm going to do this. On Tuesday, I'm going to do that, whatever. And if you want, you can have it all ready on one day. Because how much time do you have? Like, do you have an hour on Monday? Well, maybe you can plan the whole post for all the week and just schedule them to go up. And then you haven't got to do that, is that too much? Can you only post once a week or twice? Like, be realistic, and choose something realistic. And then, like, as we said, like, you need a story and you need relationships. So if you're going to post something, then you have better follow up on it, right? So if somebody commented on your post or asked a question about it and you don't reply, you're not going to build a relationship, right? So you got to be, again, realistic about how much time you can give and what you do. So social media is not, and digital platforms are not just something you just do, right? You've got to you can't just do and leave. And I also think you need to sort of this is where I think we struggle as church leaders most, is we need to be imaginative, creative. I know, right? So most of us are like, so me included, right? So one thing I do is like actually record the service and put it on. So I'm just transferring that sucker from one platform to another. I'm not doing anything different, other than maybe I have translated a little bit. I've moved where the mics are. I've moved things so it looks good on a screen, right? But then I also encourage us all to think about transformation. Like, so if you got up in the morning and you went down to your church building and poof, it had moved to another space, there's nothing there. You can't do that. What would you do? Like, what is something you've always dreamed of doing? I get way more interaction, especially if you want to interact with people outside of your church group, but even inside, when I do not as normally churchy things. Like, so last time I go for a walk, I love my selfie stick. I have the best $20 you ever spend, selfie stick. Go out, walk through the woods, talk about God, whatever, especially this season of creation. You know, be you. Like, like, I don't know about the underwear in the background, but like, if you love to cook, like, do something about cooking and how you find God in that. Like, be something that's authentic, you living out your faith, right? I did an interview with a retired doctor here. I had like over 6,000 views. Like, I was like, what? And like, I kept, because everyone loves him. They love him. Like, they just love him. And so they all want, like, it doesn't have to be, it can, if you can dream it and you got a phone, it's very likely you can do it.
I just want to say something, Joanne, because like, when I approached you, I had said, can you talk about Zoom and the merits of Zoom? Because really, webinars 1 and 2 were focused on Zoom in particular. And you said, not so much. You're like, for me, it's really essential. My social media is essential. I can't even do any kind of Zoom thing without the social media piece, which is why I said, let's open up this conversation, because I realized there's a lot of overwhelm that happens, and I'm trying to eliminate digital overwhelm. So I didn't want to talk about social media, but I love how you're reminding us of like the simple and real ways that you can actually teach and connect and preach and love and serve on here in a really authentic way.
And, and it doesn't have to be over the top. Like, so I'll give an example. Last week I was exhausted, right? I've been doing stuff for Season of Creation. It came to Saturday. I've been doing interviews. I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I didn't feel like calling anyone. I was just tired, and I had no imagination. And then I thought, well, people are going to expect to see something. So luckily, down over the hill is the ocean. So I went and put my tripod up and stood in front of talked about why I love the ocean. Put them. 15 minutes, I was done. And more people watch that than they watch the tape service from Sunday.
Yeah.
Because also you got to think time, right? Like, a lot of people aren't going to watch 40 minutes of anything online.
Yeah.
Like, don't be fooling yourself, no matter how good you think you are.
Exactly. That's great. Does anybody else, can anybody else give us a few, in 3 easy steps, you can build an entire community?
I don't know if it's three easy steps, but just to pick up on one thing that Joanne did say. And I think it's the importance of laying down or starting to lay down the necessary digital infrastructure. Churches, especially Anglican churches, are notoriously out of date when it comes to technology. And I don't mean to overwhelm people to say you got to go out and spend thousands of dollars on stuff, but like just little simple purchases that you can make to enable digital ministry and make it more effective. Joanne mentioned, the best tool that anybody has is the smartphone, right? You can do so much stuff with a smartphone. You don't need to go out and buy fancy cameras and those kinds of things. I would encourage people, though, to purchase a decent webcam, right, for these kinds of things, especially, so that you have a good angle. Maybe investing in some lights to give you a better lighting. One of the best things I ever bought to go with my smartphone is my little tripod, right? So your phone goes on here, so you can sit that in front of you at your desk or wherever you are, do a short little video or Facebook Live or whatever you're doing. Little things like that. Invest in a microphone. Like you have to create the infrastructure to enable this kind of ministry. Relationship is important. Story is important. Knowing what you want to say, but having some of the infrastructure in place too, that you can do some of this stuff effectively. Not to say that everything's got to be perfect and look professional. I don't think it does. I think people want honest more than, or genuine. Authentic, yeah, more than they want glitzy. And that's especially true of a certain demographic. I think a younger demographic does want a little bit more glitz and they do want it to look good. But that's all part of knowing who your audience is and what they're looking for.
Having said that, a younger demographic loves watching us old people make a fool of ourselves. So we had one church bought a new iPad. I mean, the best video was the two of them like right up close. Is this on? Is this on? Like everyone loved it.
Yeah, I don't know. We're like here in the Diocese of Eastern Newfoundland. We're in the process of, we're going to be electing a new bishop. And I keep saying to anybody who will listen to me, it's really important that we have a bishop who doesn't need to know everything about social media or be some kind of like glitzy professional when it comes to social media, but it has to be someone who is honestly trying to engage with social media. But I say, I don't know if I want to watch a bishop learn how to use social media. Like that could be really embarrassing and painful to watch.
But I mean, but it is important. Like, you brought it up, and he's not here. So, but I mean, my bishop in Central Newfoundland uses social media wonderfully. He's a very funny, down to earth person, and he does that. People, like, he's real. Like, so yesterday he put Halloween treat baskets on his head. He has a thing about hats, but I mean, like, but that's what people expect. Like, and so they feel he's real, and so they feel they can reach out to him and tell him stuff that's going on in their lives because he's real. It's authentic.
Yeah, to me, he's kind of the poster boy or poster person for what bishops and clergy should be like on social media. Just be yourself. Not that you got to be John Watton, but like just be yourself. Be honest, be genuine, be real. Somebody asked what the name of my tripod is. It's called a Jobby.
And the microphone?
Microphone, I've got a Blue Yeti microphone.
He made me buy the same one.
Cool. And about how much money do they each cost?
The microphone was $120 maybe.
Okay.
Like that, yeah.
The stand, $20 or something, $30.
Cool.
Depends on which brand and where you get them, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you can get these on Amazon, right? You can just go now. Yeah. So there you go, Tepiwa. Jonathan, do you have anything to add to this, how to build an entire digital ministry in 3 easy steps?
I think we're all avoiding the 3 easy steps. I mean, one thing I would say is that I think it's really important to invest emotionally in this as well as in terms of equipment. I mean, when we talked about liturgy a couple of weeks ago, we kind of spoke about how Zoom is a little bit like an IKEA flat pack when it comes to providing a one-size-fits-all space that doesn't actually match anything of what we do. And again, I don't want you to feel sort of depressed and despondent, because I know what it can be like dealing with these things. As you say, like you sign in and everybody's going, oh, well, I can't switch my microphone on. Are you there? And that kind of thing. And it does kind of wreck any attempt that we might have at creating sacred space. But I do think that it is still possible to create a sense of the sacred online, and that you can still do things with the same degree of integrity and solemnity and everything else. But you do need to kind of approach it from that perspective, because as Rob said, this is for a long time now. And I mean, it's my personal opinion, but I also feel that particularly for those of us in the more vulnerable spots at the moment, we've probably got quite a long time. I mean, I don't think it's going to be the 28 days that the Quebec government are suggesting. I think that maybe come next spring, things might be improving a little bit, but we've got Christmas to get through. We may even have to do another Easter. I mean, I hope we don't. But I think it is important that we just recognize the need for that emotional attachment still, and that we're never going to be as attached to the internet as we are to the buildings in which we work. They don't have that same special something. I mean, I remember years ago when I was a student in the States, we actually did a choir tour back to the UK, which was kind of ironic for me. And the first place we went to sing was in Winchester Cathedral, which I've known for many years. And I just remember like coming straight off the plane and standing there in this space, literally feeling like everything on top of me in a good way, but you could literally feel the stuff seeping out of the walls. And I think we do feel that with our own churches and the buildings that we work in. And obviously we don't have that online, but that didn't exist in physical space either for a while. It was created, and this is again part of community. We actually have a way of creating a new space that matches our community, and that will change and evolve as we change and evolve. So it's not about a rigid concept, but that when we take that leap and say, okay, this isn't as bad as we think it could be, that our fear of like the digital realm not really being real life, we can overcome that, and I think embrace some of it too.
And I think, Jonathan, to build on what you said, like people have that connection already, and you can how we film and where we film, things we do, can also help people make a place connection, right? The kinds of backgrounds we use and things like that. So I know I did an interview a few weeks ago at the Beothic Center here at their Spirit Garden. In the comments I got was people talked about when they had been there, and seeing that brought back all the emotion and all the experience of having been there and what they have felt there. And so I think we can still tap into some of that and into that memory we have of place. And so I do think that place is very important, and place making is very important in what we do.
That's why I think some of the things Joanne has been doing are really important, because she's capitalized on the kind of gift that COVID-19 has been to us, which was to kick us out of our buildings, which we've been talking about for a number of years now, saying the importance of getting outside of the church building. And so COVID comes along and does just that for us. So to capitalize on those things and actually do stuff outside of our buildings, I felt in some ways here at St. Mark's, we've been very restricted to inside the building. Now that's has a lot to do with the way that we did stuff. We had a professional with cameras, and right, so we were more in place. But I think part of the other conversation that the church has got to have is we've done something now about getting outside of the building. Now we got to start talking to people about getting off social media, right? Like not spending all your time there, and educating people about how to use this stuff and how to have limits with it, and knowing when to put it down and go outside and be around people, and so that there's a lot of conversations that we still need to have. We're only just starting to unpack some of this stuff as the church. And this is where I think some good dialogue partners can be from people outside of the church, right? To help us figure out how do we use this and how do we do it in a healthy and balanced kind of way. Because I hear from some of my parishioners, they get up Sunday morning and they make the rounds. They're the whole day watching church. And there's a danger to that too, that we're turning worship into something to be consumed rather than to participate with. So there's a whole lot of other conversations that we need to have, and we're only just scratching the surface with some of this stuff.
Great, so much great stuff. I do have one more question for you, and I again, you please feel free to use the chat, and shortly we'll be unmuting ourselves to have more of a regular conversation with each other. But let's just, because we haven't really talked explicitly about community, although community has been woven into our conversation altogether. Let's just talk specifically about community and community building. Some people say that you can't actually build effective community online. Some people, still say that. I want to know what you all would say to challenge this. Can we build effective community on here, or is this just fake community?
I think you can. I think, but again, if you have to do a lot of the stuff that we already talked about, right? It doesn't happen by accident. You have to be very intentional about it. Know what it is you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, know the people that you're trying to build this community with. I know one of the things that served us very well was the idea that we had started the intentional community building, the digital community building before COVID. And so we had a lot of the stuff in place. But if you're one of those people who are just starting to, be patient with it and don't expect that it's going to be, miraculous overnight or even just over, a number of months, that you have to keep at it and be intentional about it and keep trying different things. But I definitely believe that community can be built. I hear some of my colleagues talk about how they, we have people watching from here and there, and that's great, but I don't know if that's building community. I use the analogy of saying, oh, we had 10 new people drive by the church today. Aren't we creating community? Right? It's a good start, and that's one of the gifts of digital media, is that you can reach a bigger audience, but the goal is not an audience. The goal is community. The goal is discipleship. The goal is transformation. That takes a long time and a lot of hard work, in the same way that it does in real life, in person, right? It doesn't happen by accident. You have to do all the hard, prep work that we've already talked about in order for it to happen, and be committed for the long haul.
Mm-hmm. I'll quickly read a comment from Stephen, who says to you, yes, worship cannot be merely a spectator sport. Pre-recorded services seem flat without the participation of congregants, reading, responses, etc. Anybody else on the panel would like to weigh into the challenging the idea that we cannot build community on here?
I think traditionally, looking historically, the church has always built community over space and time. I mean, we all build our faith community based on a book with people we've not met. Paul built community by writing letters to people and staying connected. The church, did it similarly. So the only difference is that, we're using maybe a different form of media, but the church has, is founded on media, that sort of new media of writing and that Paul used enabled him to build that community. The invention of the printing press was huge, in the sort of Reformed kind of tradition, in enabling people to have access to information and build community across space and time. So we're just using a different media. So I think we need to get our knickers unknotted, right? It's not, we're doing what, Paul did. We're doing what the rabbis did when they were in exile. We're trying to figure out our story, looking at the stories we already have and reconfiguring it. So just as they started writing things from orally to scroll, like we're, doing something that has a long history in our tradition. So I think it's, using a form of media to create community is what we've done. And I don't think we can underestimate the safety that digital community can provide for some folk. So I know a lot of people who are disenfranchised from the church, who may seem to be only consuming church, but I think we need to be very careful before we make judgments about that. Because if people are coming consistently, they're coming to nurture relationships. And I know I hear from folk that tell me they have friends who never ever go to church, but they're friends of theirs, and they watch the same service as them, like in BC and in Newfoundland, and then they chat about it. Right. So we're only seeing part of how this builds community, and so I think you need to be mindful of that. And I know my own pastoral experience, because of the online digital community that presence and that we've built, people have reached out. So I've had people who aren't of my congregations, who live locally, who don't feel safe in their own community, have reached out with questions because they feel they won't be judged and they will be welcomed. They reach out for mental health support when they would never come to me personally and vocalize that, but they would text that or write that. Have been able to reach out for pastoral support in life and death kinds of hospital situations where they're in a room with people who aren't of faith and they want prayer. So we can do that way. So, I think, we need to be very mindful that this is just another tool in a long history of tools that faith communities have used to build up their faith and build up their community, and to build relationships and to tell their story.
Well said. Thank you. Jonathan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think so much of this depends on what we mean by community, because it's a sort of catch-all term that can apply to many different things, and lots of different people need different types of communities at different times as well. And the internet obviously is a much looser community at times. It also enables people to adopt an online persona that is different from their real life persona, but so too is the same when people come to church, that there's so much that we probably don't know about many of the people that we would normally sit next to every Sunday, year after year. And of course, like we said, this is just part of a human existence. I mean, I'm sure many of us remember having pen pals when, again, like someone you never ever met and never even spoke to, but you still kind of felt that you knew them. And so I'm not sure if community in the traditional sense maybe is the right word, but maybe it is about relationships, that we can build relationships which in turn turn into community. And that, sure, it was a lot easier in some ways when we just had to open a door and see who walked through it. But the reason that many churches had failed in recent years is because they didn't realize that you still actually have to do more than just that. You have to go out into the community, whatever you mean by that. And the digital world enables us to do that too. So as long as I think we approach it that way and recognize that there is an opportunity here to engage with people, and in the same way that we know that such and such I can only ever deal with if I give them a call, and someone else will never pick up the phone, but if I email, it's just the same as everything else. It's just being adaptive and recognizing that different people have different needs that we need to meet. And obviously we all have only so many resources available to us, and there's only so much you can do. But I do think we can still build community. And I think all the things we've been talking about in terms of giving people something to identify with, having a presence, being that support when people need it, that is all what community, for me at least, is about. It's knowing that there's somebody there. It's not always about physically being next to somebody. It's having that knowledge that when I need someone, they're there for me. And in some ways it's easier now than it was before.
As you know, Jonathan, as I constantly Facebook video messenger you about 15 times a day, and you're there for me. So thank you. Yeah, that's all lovely and helpful and really appreciated. Thank you. I will invite you now to unmute yourselves if you would. We do have a few minutes left. Michael says there are differences of opinion and practice on whether the congregation should mute themselves throughout an online service. It can be a bit chaotic at times if people are responding audibly but not quite in step, or there's sound picked up from the background, but I like to hear them responding. It makes me feel less like I'm on my own. In my opinion, helps with the sense of being a participant rather than just a consumer. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and I know that we took Carla's advice and we said the Lord's Prayer, all of us with our microphones on, and maybe when we close in prayer today, we will use the same approach. I like the chaos of it as well. So I invite chaos right now. Unmute yourselves if you feel like it. You can perhaps, if you have a question for anybody on the panel, go ahead. Or comment, or if you want to share an experience about community or faith formation in your context, go ahead as well.
I've been part of an online community for about 20 years. It's probably the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning after I pee. I go and check to see what's happening on EF because I know them very well. I've met them in person, actually. I went to Europe. Most of them are in Europe. And I went to Europe, about 12 years ago now. And they were exactly how I had pictured them, even though it's not a visual thing. We don't see each other. We just comment, and it's a internet forum. So I think my sense of community I feel with my EF friends is just as intense as with my in real life friends. So this idea that a virtual community, I like what Jonathan had to say about, even in a real life community, we're only seeing a virtual aspect of someone. So how we curate ourselves, our personalities, and that's just human nature. We do put forth a certain curated personality depending on the situation. And whether it's online or whether it's in real life, I think that general idea comes forth in whatever responses we have to each other.
Carla, what's EF?
Oh, a Europe forum. It's not a church thing at all.
And I suppose I would say that, yeah, I mean, I think it's very intimidating at the moment to think this is an unprecedented, totally new situation and none of us knows what to do. But actually, I think some of us already probably do know an awful lot of what we should, or at least know the basic principles that underlie what we need to do, and that we can perhaps reassure ourselves a bit more by affirming that within ourselves and saying, actually, this is nothing new. We have been doing this for decades, centuries. Let's just pull that knowledge together and apply it to this new scenario.
Gail says, this has been a fabulous webinar with so many ideas and thoughts on how to keep in touch with our congregants. Thank you so much. Sorry to hear 1,000 cases in Quebec today. Yes, thank you, Gail. That is frightening.
Very scary, folks. We need to pray a lot.
And be very careful.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say hello to Joanne.
Hi, Steve.
Are you still knitting? Knitting?
Oh, yes. Crocheting this week, but I do knit still.
Okay, good. Nice to see you. Thank
In
you.
her bio, of course, and everything.
I know. I crocheted since I was like 8 or 10. I learned to knit like last year, so I'm very excited that I'm bi-stitchorial now. I can knit.
Joanne, may I ask you, it was your parish that was celebrating some big anniversary this spring, right? And had that fabulous presentation online. Boy, gosh, that was beautiful.
Well, and it was. It amazed us because this is like confession time, right? So the week that everything closed down was the week we were supposed to start our planning for the anniversary. That was the first meeting we canceled. I completely forgot about the anniversary after that. I was just like coping, right?
Yeah.
Probably 2 weeks before the anniversary, somebody said, we're supposed to have an anniversary, 175th. And we're like, how we do this? So the thing is, instead of mourning what we couldn't do, I thought, okay, what couldn't we do? So we got messages from a whack of former rectors. They would never be able to fly that.
That's it.
Drone footage. We got people to film themselves reading and singing all over the country who are attached to the parish and sent it. And I learned how to edit very well. But yeah, like you sort of have to sometimes let go of what you always did and imagine something really completely different. And it worked.
That was spectacular. Is it still available online?
Still on YouTube, our 175th
I
anniversary.
recommend it.
Yeah. Anglican Parish of Twillingate, our YouTube is. But yes, that up until my interview with Dr. John, that was our most popular video. Mostly because it starts with the drone footage over the ocean. It comes up over the graveyard.
Fabulous.
Right into the church. People are like, you had a drone in your church. I said, yes, we did.
Where'd you get the drone, Joanne?
Well, there's a local photographer who does, like, he's always posting it on Facebook. And so one of the people on our committee said, why don't we ask him if he would do this for us? And he did. So that's the thing, like, having people in your community, having relationships, asking people. And we paid him to do that. Like, let me, so full disclosure. But because he's an artist struggling to make a living, we thought this is what we could do, right? We also had, like, a major success with a rock painting campaign.
Yeah.
We do 175. So we said, let's try to get 175 painted rocks. And because St. Peter, the rock, right? We thought this was. So we had some kids do a video for us, and we started. And like the first week was like, no, like we had like 5 rocks, and people were like, you're going to be up all night painting rocks. I'm like, just give it time. We end up having 200 or 300 rocks, and then people came and got them, and now people continue. So that was June. People continue to pick up rocks and drop off rocks.
Wow.
Still there every single week.
Well, and all of those little photo moments with so many people and then your young musicians, I think I mention it because it really does show, I think, a lot of what you're describing about the community building aspect and the far and wide,
Yeah, and we had a committee. So this committee had this idea to like include kids for that song, and then this committee had this idea to use a drone, and this person in the committee had this idea, and then we just wove them together.
Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
I'll have to have a look at that. We've at St. Stephen's postponed our 200th anniversary because we didn't think it hit enough of the boxes for us to do it. But I think you guys are in a different shutdown situation, though, too.
Well, yeah, I mean, at that time we were a bit more shut down, but yeah, no, we're not quite as severe. But everything we didn't included 4 people or fewer. So I didn't do the normal service as a whole service. This sort of freaked our bishop out a little bit. But so we had one person come in. So we had one person who did a reading who's undergoing chemo. So he came in by himself, did the reading, we filmed it, and he left. And other people came in, did a reading. So then we had like 4 people did the music, they left. When we did the procession, we had myself and the bishop, Crucifer, I think probably one other person did the procession, the bishop left. Do you know what I mean? Everything was done in a self-contained unit so that it was done safely.
Thank you. I'll have to have a look to see if there's other possibilities we could try. Thank you.
At that time, we weren't allowed to worship. We weren't allowed to gather. I don't know how many it was. 10. It was very small, the number that we could gather, and we weren't allowed to worship. More than several people when we did the film. We weren't back in our buildings then.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I would like to take a minute to thank you all for presenting this morning, for that really, really rich conversation. So much for us to reflect on and pray on and hope about, because I know this is a really difficult time, but I do think this is a message of hope and encouragement. So thank you for that. And thank you for those who have showed up every Friday for these past 3 weeks with me. I really have enjoyed this time of learning. I found it to be really rich personally, and I hope it was for you as well. I've received a lot of good feedback, so that is helpful. Feel free to share this this once it's available up on a YouTube, it'll be up on our website later today. So this effectively closes our 3-week webinar series. There will, of course, be ongoing opportunities for learning and growing together. The next thing I will be doing is, of course, the youth ministry one, which comes up at the end of October, as I already mentioned. So definitely keep your eyes open for that, and let your youth ministry people know that Sheila McLean from the National Church will be with us for that conversation, which will be great. So let's everybody unmute yourselves. We're going to say the grace, and we're going to say it in all the weird ways that we do say it. Are there anything that either Jonathan or Joanne or Rob would like to say in conclusion before I shut it all down?
Thank you.
Sorry, yes, thank you. But I mean, it's come up a lot in this one, but throughout the series is nobody's on their own through this. And certainly what we've been saying in this is about community, and community extends in many different directions. So when you're in the depths of winter and you're feeling abandoned and alone, remember you're not, that we're all here for you. And the main thing about this series was encouraging people to pool resources, come together, and to see the strength in the community that already exists here. So I mean, I'm certainly always happy to be contacted by people that need any support, whether it's music or other stuff that we've spoken about. And I know that many of the presenters in previous ones have said the same. So do reach out, do find that community as well, whether it's here or within your own local networks, because I think that's what we all need to get through this. So stay strong. We'll come out the end.
I would say ditto for me, and I need to go because I have a funeral. So, and people are starting to show up and like ring the doorbell. And stuff like that. I'm gonna have to go. So it was great to spend time with everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you so much. All right, let's do the grace, shall we?
The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the
Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit.
Evermore.
Amen.
Amen. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everybody. Be blessed.
And take care. Keep knitting.